On this very special day, we celebrate, give thanks for the gift that God has given us. On May the 23rd, a marvelous cry was heard. It was the cry of the one we love. You're a special person in my heart, a flower that was planted that shall not depart. You're the rock that's held this family for so long. We will go on as long as you are here in our hearts. Through 5 generations, you taught us love and determination. And today, we just want to say thanks. You taught me how to be a man and oh so strong. We will go on as long as you are here in our hearts. I wrote that song for my great-grandmother for Thank you guys, thank you. I wrote that song for my great-grandmother. She truly was a flower. Her name was Daisy. Speaking of flowers, and I didn't know if Phil was going to talk about flowers. She was a flower that God planted. I believe God told her parents to name her Daisy because she's a flower. I think sometimes they should have named her Rose, because she cut you if you get out of line. Just so you know that. So I'm going to work with this as best I can. I tried to memorize this. Most of it is from my heart, but I wanted to make sure that I gave her just due with, as I speak to you guys. So, my great-grandma lived to be 95. And for her 88th birthday party, we had an 88th birthday party for her because she was actually, it was the onset of Alzheimer's. And that's why I sang that song at her 88th birthday party. Most people never get to know their great-grandma, or, if they do know their great-grandma, that person's typically incapacitated because they're older. I had the opportunity to not just know my great-grandma, but she raised me. She ended up passing, I'm going to put this up here and talk to you guys because I want to make sure I don't miss nothing, but she ended up passing away at the age of 95. So I was fortunate. She raised me because my mother was a teenage mother and my father died when I was 5 years old. I actually was raised by 2 very strong women, my great-grandmother and my grandmother, mother and daughter. We lived in the same house. And they were truly mother and daughter. They loved each other in a very special way by fussing and arguing all the time and sticking me in the middle of it. But they really loved each other. And those 2 women, they raised me. My great-grandmother moved to Detroit from Alabama where she was about in her late teens. Shortly after that, she got married. And she was married for only about maybe 10 years, and she had 5 children. And she ultimately ended up divorcing her husband because of, he kind of was unfaithful, to be transparent. And these are stories she told me about throughout time. But she ended up divorcing her husband. And when she divorced her husband, he wasn't there. He didn't support the family. So my great-grandmother supported the family by cleaning people's houses. She cleaned people's houses until her kids started having kids. And when her kids started having kids, she became the caretaker of her kids' kids. My great-grandmother raised her kids, her kids' kids, her kids' kids' kids, her kids' 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 kids, and her kids' 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 kids. 5 generations. I don't know how she did it because I can barely stomach my own kids, but she did it. She did. Out of all the kids, I believe that I was her favorite. Yeah, that's right. I won't snicker. I was. Don't snicker. I was her favorite just because I was, but I was probably her favorite because I lived with her most of my life. She raised me, she and my grandmother, so I was probably her favorite because of that. And then being her favorite, I had a special place, and she had a special place with me. So I told you I was raised by these two women, and in my non-traditional nuclear family, it consisted of these two women. And my grandmother and great-grandmother, those two, my grandmother went to work every day. And when she would go to work every day, I just watched her go to work. And my great-grandmother stayed at home. And so my grandmother went to work. My great-grandmother stayed at home, and she took care of the house. So in essence, if you would look at the traditional roles, if you would look at this, my grandmother kind of played the role of the male, and my great-grandmother played the role of the female, if you would think about that. But for me, there were no traditional roles. Because my grandmother taught me the value of work. She taught me the value of education and doing all the things I needed to do. And my great-grandmother taught me how to cook, how to clean, how to do everything. So they made me a well-rounded person. Even though oftentimes, like I said, I was stuck in the middle of their arguing and they're loving each other, they taught me so much. Now looking at that dynamic and recognizing it, what I saw was, again, there were no gender roles. They weren't assigned. And learning those things. My grandma Daisy taught me how to clean the house. She taught me how to take care of myself, my hygiene, and everything else. And don't tell her I just called her Daisy, even though she ain't here. She would knock me out if she heard me call her first name. But in that aspect of things, I learned so much stuff that maybe a guy wouldn't know how to do. How to cook, how to clean. I learned how to garden. I learned all of these things because this wonderful woman implanted all these things in me. She also taught me how to stand up for myself. She taught me how to fight. Yep, that 4'11" lady took me in the backyard one day. She had boxing gloves. She started punching me in the gut. I'm just playing. That didn't happen. But that visual was hilarious, right? This little lady said, "Man up, toughen up." Well, what did happen is that I would go outside and you play with the friends that you lived with, that you grew up with, and we played, and somebody took my candy. I come in the house crying. I was a crybaby, okay? I don't admit it. Not no more, I was a crybaby. Okay, sometimes I cry. Anyway, side note. I would cry, and if I got into a fight or somebody took something from me, and she would say, "If you don't get back out there and you stand up for yourself, you're going to have to deal with me." Ouch. It sounds harsh. It does. It does. But what she was teaching me was to stand up for myself. And not just myself, to stand up for others who couldn't stand up for themselves. She taught me how to be a man, not realizing that she was teaching me how to be a man in every aspect of life. So she taught me how to stand up for myself mentally and physically. I told you, you said, you were right on time with House because I told you her name should have been Rose because she touched you. She taught me these things. And these things have lasted and stuck with me. Even though she wasn't educated, as I got older, I realized that she could do everything. She and my grandmother knew everything, could do everything. And because of them instilling that in me, I knew that all things were possible with my faith and my family. So here's what happens. They taught me all this stuff, and my great-grandmother was this rock, like I said. Then came Alzheimer's. When Alzheimer's came, the strongest woman that I knew started to forget things. She started to tell the same stories over and over again. And I sit there and listen, just like I had never heard them before. I listened until other things started to change. My first and my biggest champion, my biggest cheerleader, my biggest advocate was not the same. She was different. We could no longer let her stay home alone. We couldn't let her cook anymore. She stopped gardening and she stopped watching Matlock. And if you got anybody got older relatives, every old person I know watches Matlock. Who knows about Matlock? Every person I know, maybe it's an older black woman thing, because my grandma now if you Google it, young people. Google it. But she stopped watching it, and that's when I knew things were really wrong. We had to put special locks on the doors to go along with the locks that were already on her mind, so she wouldn't get out of the house. She went from forgetting and telling me the same stories over again to telling me absolutely nothing, because at some point she stopped talking. She went from being excited to see her grandkids to being disoriented, disconnected, and disenfranchised. She went from barely eating to not eating at all to hospice. One of the strongest people that I knew, my biggest advocate, was sick and was going to die. And my heart was heavy and it was stricken. But little did I know that God was giving me earthly angel advocates to help fill that gap. These advocates would show her kids, her kids' kids, her kids' kids' kids, her kids' 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 kids, and her kids' 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 kids a level of compassion in our time of losing my great-grandma. Our family rocked. We were blessed with a hospice team that was like family, a team that helped turn one of the most painful experiences that we had into one of the most palatable experiences. A team just like most of yours. We had home health aides who cared, nurses who cared, social workers who cared. We had people who cared. We also had the right supplies at the right time to transition. And we had people to tell us what to expect, what to look for, and how to manage it. It made a huge, huge difference. And I can't imagine how difficult it would have been if we didn't have that help. This past week, I fulfilled a lifetime goal. I did something that I always wanted to do, just a thing that I was able to do, and I'm so proud of it. And the reason that I have the ability and the knowledge and the talent to do it is because of what these two women poured into my life. They always talked or said that I can't teach you how to be a man, but I can teach you how a man should be. There's a saying that goes, and we've all heard it, treat people the way you want to be treated. Do unto others as you have them do unto you. I don't do that, and I don't believe any of you do that. If you were to close your eyes for just a few seconds, if you would indulge me for just a second, think about the people and the persons that matter the most to you in this world. Just see their faces in your minds. You can open your eyes. I don't believe you do that, because the measure that we have for ourselves is oftentimes higher than the measure that we have for our loved ones. So with that being said, I think we treat people the way we want our loved ones to be treated. That's why you do the work you do, because it's thankless at times. And sometimes you see people in their most vulnerable states. Sometimes you have to share personal stories. Sometimes you just have to share what's going to happen that's going to be tough. And sometimes you have to just be vulnerable. And I think it's okay, because just like I stand here now, I believe that vulnerability creates visibility for others to see their own capabilities. So I say this, hats off to you all for what you do. Please know that you're making an impact, and keep doing it. Reach more, reach harder, do more, and just continue to be a blessing to these families. And thank you for letting me share my daisy, my flower with you. Thank you.